Hello, I'm Buck Malick, and this is another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. Today, Judy Freund is with me, and we're going to talk about upcoming events relating to neotropical birds. More on that soon. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Buck. Good to be here with you.
Thank you. Let's start with the event on May 10th that is such a highlight of the year for Tropical Wings.
It is. It is. So Tropical Wings has selected that weekend in May. It's always the weekend that Mother's Day is going to fall upon to host our bird migration celebration. It begins with a lovely event at the Phipps on Friday evening. Typically what's involved in that event is an exhibition of student art. Students from the elementary school here in Hudson, middle schools, high schools, it'll vary, and some of the student art that's been collected from Costa Rica, the Osa Peninsula. So that art is on exhibit. There also is a silent auction, and of course we have a speaker, a keynote speaker. And so that is Friday, May 10th. It is.
At the Phipps, starting at 6:30, right, and running
correct.
till about 8 o'clock.
That's correct, 8 or 9 o'clock, right.
Ah, and there are other events that are part of this whole constellation of events on that weekend, aren't there?
That's correct.
Why don't you tell our viewers about other things that follow after the May 10th?
Yeah, I will. When the bird migration celebration was first conceived 6 or 7 years ago, the idea is that, of course, the birds come and pass through Hudson, but they pass all along the St. Croix Flyway. And so we had the idea that we would host events up and down the St. Croix River. The first year there were probably a half a dozen events. We placed a lot of them along the Art Bench Trail. In the last couple of years we've kind of settled into some really fine activities that are located in 3 or 4 different places. So of course we start again on Friday night at the Phipps, and then Saturday morning here in Hudson at the Carpenter Nature Center Wisconsin campus, which is just a couple miles south of Hudson, the community, they host the event Saturday morning. It starts at 8 o'clock with a bird hike. 8 o'clock also there'll be bird banding. Carpenter has beautiful nature walks. People are invited to participate in either on their own or with someone who will guide a nature hike. They're not doing the Bio Blitz this year, but every other year Carpenter's done the Bio Blitz. So it's really a nice, fun event for adults as well as kids. There's some light hospitality early in the morning, that sort of thing.
People need to bring anything in particular?
The only thing that they need to bring is, if they're going to participate in the bird hike, bring binoculars, although typically the St. Croix Bird Club will have some binoculars should they not have their own pair. And then obviously suitable walking shoes, that sort of thing. Yeah.
For a hike of what, a mile or less?
It's, yeah, I'd say a mile is probably a really good estimate. They just have a lovely area. They call it the Bowl. And it's a very open space with kind of small trees around it. And it's a real, it's rich with birds, particularly at this time of the year. And then of course there also are the prairie fields where you'll see a lot of the similar birds, but you may see some others that'll be around there.
Is that location apt to be impacted by high water if the rivers are still high?
No, it's
No
high
worries
and
there.
dry.
Oh, okay.
It's high and dry. Again, you go about, it's about a mile south of the Y Camp St. Croix, and then you'll see the signs directing you to Carpenter Nature Center. Yeah.
That's great. Now, if people don't go there on Saturday morning, there are other choices, right?
There are other choices. If you're going to go up north and you're going to go to Interstate Park, if you meet there at about 10 o'clock, they will again have a lovely bird hike. And in that case, of course, you'll be going through that park. if you choose to go south and you go down to Prescott, down at the Great River Road Visitor and Learning Center, again, there'll be bird hike and there'll be other activities that raise awareness. They're basically educational activities. Both of these are family friendly, okay? And then on Saturday, also at the Hudson Hospital, through their Healing Art program, some of the artwork that the children have created will be moved to the hospital and will be on display there, again, through their Healing Art program.
I think we were saying earlier that today, as we are speaking, the students are learning about the birds from John and Patty Mueller, right?
They are.
Retired teachers, and then they're supervised in the production of their artworks by local artist Lana Schoberg, is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that'll come together by the 10th for that display. And how long is that display going to be at the hospital?
So the hospital display will be there until June 30th, again, as part of that Healing Arts exhibit. And just to repeat, it's not only the children at, in this case, Rivercrest, then there also are some students who are up in Balsam Lake, the high school, and will integrate as well artwork that was gathered when a group went down to Costa Rica earlier this winter, and they collected children's artwork down there.
Is it your understanding that some of those art from the 3 different sources will be at the FIPS
Yes.
also? And
Absolutely.
then it'll be on long-term display at the hospital.
There's another nice event that'll happen on Friday evening. A couple years ago, the children, with the help of John Mueller, they wrote a song called "There Are No Borders," and it's a lovely song, and it's got a really lovely message that it's really fundamental to the mission and the values of Tropical Wings, and that is that these little birds they come to us in the summer, and then they go down to Costa Rica in the winter, and they don't know that now we're in the United States and now we're down in Central America. They don't recognize borders, and it's incumbent upon us to think about their habitat in both of those areas. So that's a lovely song. And our keynote speaker this year is Steve Betchel. I think I'm saying that name correctly. And I've heard him a number of times in Menominee. His knowledge of birds and bird sounds, the songs that they make, is just phenomenal. I'm in awe every time that I have an opportunity to listen to Steve or to accompany Steve when he's in a birding environment. It's just, for these people, it's like another language that they're learning, so very fun.
Now I noticed Brian Collins, and he's the high school teacher from Balsam Lake, right?
Yes.
And he's a board member of Tropical Wings, as you are. He's speaking somewhere. It's he who's informing his students.
Correct.
So they can create the art.
Correct.
He, in his own right, is a heck of a birder, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He absolutely. And I've also heard Brian a number of times. Brian will be at the Chippewa Valley Nature Festival the first weekend in June, and one of the workshops he's doing is called Birding by Ear. Same thing I was just talking about.
Yeah.
Brian also combines birding with photography. And so he's a wonderful photographer. And when you have the expertise that he has, he's worked, I believe, for the Fish and Wildlife Service. When you have the expertise that he has, you kind of get a sense about where to set up your camera at just the right time, just the right angle, so that you can get amazing photographs. I've had the opportunity to take a couple of photography workshops with Brian. These people are amazing, amazing in their interest and understanding of birding and how it is that it has a wonderful positive impact on children, families, communities. It's really great.
I think we have some images, or some of his pictures that I believe the TV folks will insert in between our words here. And are there any other events that we haven't covered
Yes,
that are
we did
coordinated
not.
as part of this?
And the other event that we should call your attention to again is Sunday morning, which is Mother's Day, over in Bellwyn Conservancy, which is in Afton. Again, from 6:45 to 9 in the morning, they'll be leading an early morning bird hike. Same sort of thing, bring your binoculars, dress appropriately dependent upon the weather, and go out and enjoy the birds. The last couple of years, that particular weekend it's as if sort of the gates opened, wherever that would be, southern Wisconsin, and the birds were just all making their way north. I recall just such rich and wonderful experiences being out at Bellwyn, as well as out at Carpenter, and as well, by the way, a week earlier in River Falls. And it just seemed as though the birds were just all there waiting for us to look at them.
Oh, that's grand. Bellwyn is the place where Lynette Anderson is an educator, and she's on the board
She's
of
on the
Tropical
board as
Wings,
well,
isn't she?
yeah.
Along with you. Yeah. That you mentioned a week earlier in River Falls, and I brought the flyer for this year's Wings of Spring, they call it. That's by the St. Croix Valley Bird Club, which of course are friends with Tropical Wings, but of a different group and slightly different geography. And their event is Saturday, May 4th at the River Falls City Hall between 8 in the morning and 12:30 in the afternoon. Oh, that's where I saw that Brian is speaking. Brian is speaking at 11 o'clock that morning at the City Hall in River Falls.
And again,
Wings of
that's an
Spring.
amazing event. That's the organization that leads, I believe will be leading the bird hike at the
Carpenter, Wisconsin.
a week later. And that's the event that I also referenced, that they do an early morning bird walk. Last year they just went along the pathway by the Kinney. And I mean, we hardly walked because there were so many birds.
No.
Really, that's a great, these events are just wonderful. And I really hope that moms and dads and families, if you have children that are at all interested in the birds, I mean, most kids are. These are just great opportunities to introduce them to seeing a lot and a great variety. To say nothing of the bird banding at Carpenter, by the way.
Yeah,
Very fun.
and Carpenter Nature Center is famous in the region for its bird banding, isn't it? Which has been going on at that location for over 30 years, I think it is now. The staff are qualified to band all kinds of birds. We probably ought to talk a little bit more about Tropical Wings, the organization. You know, it's come up from time to time. What's the main focus, would you say, of Tropical Wings?
So this is 2019, about 8 years ago. At that time, I was involved in Rotary International at the district level. And the then
Well, you were the district governor.
I was the
You
district
were
governor.
involved, all right.
Yeah, I was the district governor. And the then superintendent of the St. Croix Wild and Scenic Riverway, Christine, had the idea to create a sister park arrangement between parks in the upper Midwest, or areas managed by the National Park Service, Department of Interior, and parks on the Osa Peninsula in Costa Rica. And the commonality is that our little birds, our songbirds, migrate between these two areas. Again, here in the summer, down there in the winter. The Rotary District helps support Chris traveling down to Costa Rica and signing that sister park agreement. And it seemed as though an organization that would help promote and support this concept of a sister park agreement seemed appropriate. And that's how Tropical Wings came about and developed. So the mission is very simple. First of all, to support the sister park agreement. Well, what does that mean? That means habitat in our area as well as in Costa Rica, education which is really what the bird migration celebration is all about, and to support professional development in that we've supported professionals from the Park Service, from the Fish and Wildlife Service, traveling to Costa Rica, learning from those folks, sharing best practices, and some of those folks coming up here. Our current liaison, Paul Labovitz, is with the Indiana Dunes, and we're hoping that Paul is going to be going down to Costa Rica, meeting with some of our friends, some individuals that we've really built a solid relationship in what is the equivalent of their National Park Service to move that mission forward. So in a nutshell, it came out of this sister park. It's to support the sister park, and it's about habitat, it's about education, and it's about really sharing of professional knowledge.
Mm-hmm. So Tropical Wings Incorporated is a 501c3, right? So that it's not subject to income tax, and people who make donations can deduct them on their tax returns and things like that. If people want to join, there's a website, right?
Exactly.
In fact, you're the treasurer, so you would process
Tropicalwings.org.
Tropicalwings.org, that's straightforward. And then there are some other, there's a friend of the Sister Park Agreement contract or relationship that's just been completed,
Correct.
hasn't it? That's kind of new news.
Yeah.
But tell us a little about that with Paul, Paul was previously, wasn't he, the superintendent of MNRA, the Mississippi National Riverway Park over here?
That's correct.
But now he's at Indiana Dunes.
And
but
that's
he's
correct.
still in that same relationship to the Sister Park Agreement. What else do you see this friends thing being?
So the parks, and I can't speak to, does every national park have a friends organization? Is it dependent upon interest and volunteers and those kinds of things? But I do know that there are really, really important groups that support the work of national parks in any given area. I mean, the most obvious one right here is the St. Croix River Association. They are the official friends group of our beautiful St. Croix River. And so when we went down, we being several of the board members, went down to have a face-to-face meeting with Paul. We like to do that. I think it's appropriate yearly, either if Paul happens to come up here. Otherwise, they too have this great birding celebration down at Indiana Sand Dunes. Then we talked about that the Sister Park Agreement is, it's an official agreement on behalf of the two countries and parks within the two countries, and that we could qualify as a friends group in the same way or similar way that you have friends organizations that are affiliated with any given park. And so that is what we have applied for, and we have just sort of, I guess, gotten the stamp of approval, if that's what you call that. So what will that allow us? That'll allow us to, because right now we are in proximity to the St. Croix River. And obviously, that's our geographical area. That is where we organize these kinds of things. But really, the Sister Park Agreement includes a number of parks in the upper Midwest, including, the Sleeping Bear Sand Dunes in Michigan. It includes the Apostle Islands, Isle Royale. So being the official friends group allows us in a much more organized way to reach out to these other organizations, and in a perfect world, help support the organization of volunteers that would work with each one of those in the way that we are and we vision.
It's something over a dozen American parks, right, in the upper Midwest, and something around a dozen in Costa Rica.
Not quite that many, maybe seven.
Seven?
But 6 or 7. Originally, it was going to be the St. Croix with the Corcovado Park.
Ah.
So the Corcovado Park comprises a large part of the Osa Peninsula, and it's been described by National Geographic as one of the hot spots on the planet. And then because
biodiversity?
absolutely,
or at least,
yes, in terms of richness,
biodiversity.
yes, in terms of richness of of biodiversity, wildlife, birds, and recognizing that birds just don't sort of limit themselves to the St. Croix and to the Osa. That's how initially we broadened the scope of the sister park concept here, and then the folks down in Costa Rica broadened it as well to encompass other areas that are managed by their equivalent of our National Park Service. Yeah. We send a group, we don't send a group. A couple of our board of directors organize a opportunity for individuals who are either interested in birding, interested in the idea of supporting the work of Tropical Wings, to go down to Costa Rica, typically February, early March, and have the opportunity to visit and be in some of the parks when they're down there. It's about a 2-week trip. One of the, in my opinion, one of the highlights is the opportunity to go into and stay at Corcovado Park. It's
actually rub shoulders with the park rangers there.
And the sloths and the, you know, all the other little critters that are down there. Yeah.
I'm looking at the letter that Nina, who is the Secretary of Tropical Wings, sent about as the recruitment or the organization of this 2019 trip was being sent out, and she said that the previous year they saw 294 bird species, all of the Costa Rican monkey species, sloths, coatimundi, tapirs, many species of amphibians, reptiles, and fascinating insects. Really, she says.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and they spent this February 28 to March 13. I guess that's what was proposed, and that's probably the way it turned out. They spent a couple nights in Corcovado.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of opportunities to go to Costa Rica. All you do is, I mean, you could Google travel opportunities, and an awful lot of organizations are putting together groups that will go there. What makes this special is it is focused on birding. They're phenomenal naturalists that are there, and the individual that we work with is amazing. And again, it's not to say that there aren't other amazing naturalists, but the gentleman we work with, Nito, is truly gifted in this particular field. And then, of course, the opportunity to go to parks that are part of the Sister Park Agreement to talk and speak with park rangers down there about the management, what are their issues, what are they excited about, ways that you can collaborate. That's what's embedded into this particular trip to Costa Rica that makes it really special. And again, going to and staying at the Corcovado Park. It is amazing.
it looked like this year there were openings for 8 people to make the trip, and let's see, you have to raise some pledges as connected with the Birdathon, the Wisconsin Birdathon, of $500, and then evidently the cost was about $3,400 plus the flight.
Right. So it's always limited to 10. Because that's a good number if you're going to be out birding. Mm-hmm. And the $500 pledge actually is not the Wisconsin Birdathon. That's very specific to Tropical Wings. And so that's all of the funds that are raised go toward habitat, either restoration or preservation. Some funds are also, small funds may be given to a nonprofit, Osa Birds. It's a nonprofit in the United States that has relationships on the Osa Peninsula, and to support habitat there as well. The reason that the timing of this trip landed where it is to coincide with their bird festival that's held in early March. And basically they're sending the birds off And then
That's about when
we
migration
welcome them.
begins.
Exactly, right. And then
Northwards.
we welcome them here in
Yeah.
early May. So that was how the timing sort of landed the way that it did. And that bird festival organized after the Sister Park Agreement was signed. That was an activity that the folks were with their Scenic, which is their National Park Service, that they felt would be an important educational piece, a vehicle in which they could raise awareness. So they organized that bird festival as a result of the Sister Park Agreement. And so in many ways it's a natural that we would try to see if we could travel down there to align with that. And it's a good time to be traveling to Costa Rica too.
True. I've seen pictures, and evidently there is a parade through the city.
There is.
And there are lots of kids doing artwork informed by education about
Exactly.
birds.
Right.
Have the people down there been exposed to John Mueller's song about the birds knowing no boundaries?
It was,
there a
actually it
Hispanic
was.
version of that?
It was a couple years ago. I believe it was translated into Spanish.
Oh, I see.
Right. And I don't know if he performed it down there or not, but because John has gone down a couple of times as well.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I want to talk about some bird species. You wanted to say something else first.
Sort of the last thing that I was gonna, that I was gonna say and share about that again is to really emphasize that a lot of activities, including that bird celebration, are emerging from the individuals, the professionals at Scenic, reflecting on what are some things that we can do down here to raise awareness so people begin to understand the importance of habitat and preservation and restoring and taking care of the birds. Because I don't want that professional piece of this to get lost, because that's really important.
Of course. And habitat preservation and restoration, it's all about science, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. You brought the bird list, didn't you?
I have a bird list. This is great.
This is, and the one, you got a little
the one you were
pamphlet there.
looking
Yeah,
at? Yep.
that's created by the National Scenic Riverway.
Yeah,
and
so this is the St. Croix.
Yeah, and you've marked the ones that do their wintering in Costa Rica, right?
They marked it. So I do believe that if you go up to St.
Visitor
Croix
Center in
Falls,
St. Croix Falls.
and you ask for this bird checklist of birds that you're apt to see along here, that you will get this great little list. And ones are highlighted in yellow are ones that are go to Costa Rica.
Are also found in Costa Rica.
Yeah, so they're indicated on here, the birds that migrate. However, as I said, the ones that are highlighted, we know will show up somewhere. So if those are the ones that if you're apt to go on the birding trip, the birdathon down to Costa Rica, it's really fun to see these birds. It's like that oriole, that Baltimore oriole, I know was in my backyard. I can tell.
It's incredible. It's kind of stunning to think. How many, is that 3,000 miles away?
It's a long way.
500, something like that. Those little birds make it all that way. And there, I have a list here of the ones from that list, the subset, which are ground nesters. So they would build their nests in the prairies up here in western Wisconsin. The dick thistle, the upland sandpiper, both of which are a little tending toward the rare side, and the eastern meadowlark, which we haven't been seeing anywhere near as many, and the bobolink, the grass, and 3 species of sparrow, the grasshopper sparrow, the Savannah sparrow, and the lark sparrow.
Nice.
All spend their winters in Costa Rica, their breeding season up here on the ground. Yeah.
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 It is,
Fascinating.
and it sounds, silly, but it's sort of like if you'd go and you travel to, name a place, you travel to Germany, and all of a sudden you'd see, oh, there's somebody I know from, Hudson or Wisconsin. It's almost the same thing,
We say small world, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that can happen with birds. There's a whole set of activities that Tropical Wings does around grants, right?
Yep.
And I have this year's letter that, or information that was provided for people who wanted to apply for grants of up to $1,000, individuals, businesses, and organizations for the purpose of preserving and restoring migratory bird habitat. So those grants aren't really necessarily educational grants,
Right.
but
Right.
they've got to do something with trees or bushes or grasses or something like that, water quality, whatever. And so there are some winners, and they will be announced on May 10th at the FIPS, right?
That's correct.
We won't spring that yet. We'll see.
That's correct.
We'll preserve the secret.
You know, very early on, some of the early organizers of Tropical Wings recognized that it's about the birds. In fact, there was Lori Ullman always said it's about
yeah.
the birds, and that means habitat. And we're a small, we hope growing, we are a growing organization, but clearly we don't have the capacity to be out and with our shovels and what have you doing hands-on work. And it became clear that if we can support organizations that do have the mission and the capacity to be able to do that is the direction that we needed to go. So consequently, the idea, let's raise some funds and then let's award these grants. It's amazing how a relatively small organization with a, handful of really committed people, passionate people, are able to raise funds and support, again, organizations that have the mission that is consistent with ours, that conservation ethic. So we're pushing over $20,000 that we've been able to award over including this year's grants.
And last year, in 2018, the organization applied for an Xcel Energy Foundation grant in order to support the Munch Bunch, right? The goats.
You know a lot about that.
Yeah, I was involved in that. And
It's wonderful.
that was a stage where the city couldn't quite put the money into the budget, but had done all the planning to bring the Munch Bunch down from St. Croix Falls and let them chew away in Prospect Park. And it seemed to work out well.
It's
and
wonderful.
I understand this year the city was able to get it into the budget, so they'll come back and hammer those buckthorns again, and then I believe move into a new area that's overgrown.
Wonderful. That's right.
Makes much better habitat without buckthorn in it.
And Tropical Wings was a collaborator with North Woods and Waters Heritage Organization and with the St. Croix Valley Foundation in the EPA grant.
Yeah.
And of course that trained watershed stewards, and when at the end of the grant there were some awards made, same kind of thing for education and habitat.
Yeah.
So again, just kind of making
Small
little
group
things,
making a big difference.
making things happen.
It just seems to me that we ought to also give the city of Hudson a little credit about the Bird City designation last year. It's been several years now that the city of Hudson has been a tree city, and that can be one of the cornerstones to becoming a bird city. And indeed, that's the way it played out, because there are certain species of trees that are more favorable for birds than others. The exotics that come from other continents don't do much good for our native birds, but the native plant species that co-evolved along with the birds do.
So you're reminding me of the event I referred to earlier when I talked about both going to Bellwyn Conservancy on the Birdwalk as well as in River Falls. And that Friday night, there was a speaker from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and he said exactly what you just did. He had the statistics on if, as an example, you plant or have growing in your yard or in an open space an oak tree, a native oak tree, it will support an amazing number of birds because of all the little bugs that live there.
Yeah, some
As
300
opposed-
species of
yeah.
insects.
As opposed to if you have what you might consider a lovely tree, it's beautiful, but it's a non-native, and it drops down to next to nothing. So Sunday morning, we were at Bellwyn and stood for 45 minutes watching this one tree that had an amazing number of birds, because we were just watching all the birds come and go, come and go. And then it occurred to us that this is precisely what we were told a day and a half earlier. Exactly. We were kind of experiencing that.
Saw it play out, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ken Holman, who chairs the Urban Forestry Board for the City of Hudson, you know, has been at this very same table talking about the importance of diversity of tree species, of course, but how if you only have room in your yard for one tree to add, pick a white oak or a bur oak and have 300 and some species of insects which can live on that tree without hurting the tree. And then the migrating birds have the food at the time they arrive, the little grubs and other insects that they need for their food. So I'm really proud of the City of Hudson in the way that it has moved forward in the tree area and the bird area. And
I couldn't agree more.
the leaders deserve credit.
And it was at last year's migratory celebration at the Phipps and I thank the mayor for attending that event and kind of making it the official designation official.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing, I think, for the leadership in our community to be willing to stand up and say, this is important. Everybody wants a vibrant, livable community, and that's all, you know, part of it. That's what makes it so rich for families. Yeah.
Indeed, and tourism is an important employer in our area. Of course, the clean water and attractive trees and attractive birds and bringing birders to our community. It's a win-win situation, so that's great. Well, we began by talking about the bird migration celebration activities beginning on Friday, May 10th at the Phipps at 6:30 and lasting through that weekend. Is there anything else that you think we missed here, Judy, that we should say?
All I can say is I really encourage folks to, if they've got a couple hours, Friday evening, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, to participate in some of the events. And if you're out of town the weekend of the 11th and 12th, River Falls has a lovely early morning or morning event on the 4th, which is the Saturday before.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good one. And these things are all free, right, aren't they? Yeah.
That's
free
even
and
the better part.
family friendly. Yep. Good. Well, I think that's it for another episode of Western Wisconsin Journal. Goodbye.